Those damn Africans are always killing each other, aren't they? That's typically how the international community views conflict and war all across the continent. And the sad irony is that these statements are made by people who are quite literally sitting on top of African wealth stolen from us because of these wars that are often funded by several regional hegemons. You'll notice that I didn't just say Western powers because it's not always that simple. I posted this back in May when the fighting first broke out, and more than 6 months later, it is still 100% true. If you're following these amazing Sudani creators up here, then you already know the background story of the conflict between Burhan and Hemedti. Please make sure you're following them for daily updates coming out of Sudan. In this video, I want to talk about the role of the United Arab Emirates in Sudan. This is a story about colonization, gold, including Russia, including the United States, including Israel. Everybody's in this. But don't get overwhelmed. We'll go through this together. You've heard of Darfur in relation to the genocide that began in 2003. But before all of this, Darfur was an independent sultanate that was then incorporated into Sudan by Anglo-Egyptian forces back in 1916. Now, the desire to have Darfur become part of Sudan came from the fact that Sudan was once part of Egypt in 1874, including Darfur. The Anglo-Egyptian Agreement of 1899 helped Egypt recapture Darfur and Sudan in general with the assistance of the British. And when I say with the assistance of the British, I mean that the British effectively owned Sudan. We've talked time and time again about how careless colonial borders have fueled deep conflict between different African ethnic groups. And unfortunately, Sudan is a key representative of this. We saw this when South Sudan broke away into its own new country back in 2011. The secession can be attributed to multiple reasons, but one key issue was at the helm. The central government in Khartoum had a history of neglecting economic development of the South, and this was actually the case even during colonization. Given the fact that South Sudan had all of Sudan's oil, it should have been able to reap benefits from this resource. However, the pipelines and refineries were actually in the north. With Khartoum also being in the north, this allowed the central government to concentrate the benefits of the oil in the north as well. Darfur in the west also faced similar neglect from Khartoum. There was also the added issue of Sudan's Arabized national identity being at odds with the non-Arab entities of many communities in Darfur. Remember how I said that Darfur used to be an independent sultanate? Well, the neglect and discrimination coming from the central government in Khartoum materialized into unequal water access and unequal land distribution between Arabized and non-Arabized groups. This mobilized a lot of separatist sentiment amongst three key groups in Darfur: the Four, the Zagawa, and the Masalit ethnic groups in particular. This is in spite of the fact that Darfur actually has over 80 ethnic groups. So whenever you hear of rebels in Darfur, these are typically secessionist groups made up of those three ethnic groups that I mentioned. These are the groups that were targeted in the Darfur genocide in 2003, and they're continuing to be targeted to this day. So who is targeting them? The RSF. RSF stands for Rapid Support Forces, and they're under the leadership of Hemedti. During the 2003 Darfur genocide, the despicable Omar al-Bashir was unfortunately the head of state at the time. Operating from Khartoum, he mobilized a militia to go and wipe out the Fours, the Zagawa, the Masalit, and other groups in Darfur that were secessionists. This militia is called the Janjaweed, and its members are what makes up the RSF today. This is the group that is backed by the United Arab Emirates. Janjaweed has essentially picked up, called itself a different name, and is continuing the atrocities they were once committing back in 2003 in Darfur. But there's a key difference this time, and that is gold. The main motivation of the first phase of the genocide 20 years ago was ethnic cleansing. But today, the added complexity of the gold has brought in so many more actors. So let's dive into that. One thing you need to know about Hemedti is that he owns the Jebel Amir gold mine in Darfur, and he's owned it since 2017. This gold plays a number of roles. Number one, it funds activities of the RSF, of course. Part of these operations include providing boots on the ground in Yemen on behalf of the UAE. Russia also sees Sudan as an important strategic partner because of its mercenary group, Wagner. Wagner is involved in a lot of places in Africa, most notably in Libya, and a lot of these operations are bankrolled by gold from Sudan. This gold has become even more important as sanctions placed on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine has caused it to be more reliant on gold than ever before. The RSF and the UAE have partnered in order to ensure that Russia receives this gold so that it can continue its invasion of Ukraine. Hemedti's forces guard the gold and then ship it to the UAE because the UAE, most notably Dubai, is a hub for gold trading where it can turn this gold into cash to go and finance Russia's operations. Now, throughout all these transactions, of course, the UAE also gains its gold Again, boots on the ground in Yemen, but there's other key benefits that it also gets out of this relationship with Hemeti, and that is the opportunity to become the hegemonic power in the Gulf. Over to Bin Politic, we did an episode as to why Qatar hosted the World Cup, and it had to do with oil, or the lack thereof. One of the issues that Gulf states are worried about is their oil eventually running out. And this is a large concern because their oil has been the source of their immense wealth. And like any financial advisor will tell you, the key to managing your wealth is diversifying. And that is essentially what Qatar was trying to do by hosting the World Cup. Not only would it bring attention to itself via tourism, but also via foreign direct investments, via businesses moving headquarters to Qatar, etc. All of these are revenue-driving efforts that many Gulf states are involved in, including the ridiculous architectural projects that never really seem to come to fruition, except maybe the Palm Jumeirah and the Burj Khalifa. But yeah, those are all part of a move away from oil. Go listen to that episode if you want to learn more, but I don't want to focus too much on Qatar because this is about the UAE and those are separate countries. But the motivations are the same. A partnership with the RSF provides access to minerals, aka the gold, access to farmland to begin agricultural projects to ensure that its citizens are fed, and access to Red Sea trade routes. Whoever owns the Red Sea owns everything, which is going to be a key element in being able to wrestle Gulf hegemony away from Saudi Arabia. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, while the UAE is out here scheming for the gold, it in turn is trying to play a role as a humanitarian, which is a very strange role for it to play for obvious reasons. So it's simultaneously giving aid and charity to displaced people in Sudan, whilst also backing up Hemeti's opponent, Burhan, who is also a war criminal and directly responsible for the displacement that Saudi Arabia is now trying to resolve via charity and aid. Saudi is also hoping that its partnership with Burhan enables it again to gain access to farmland as well. And in short, both the UAE and Saudi are both helping to fund atrocities for their own gain. And because they're both US allies, the US stands to win regardless of which guy gets to have control over Sudan. And of course, the United States backing of apartheid Israel is directly related to this. Before the fighting between Hemeti and Burhan broke out into all-out war, there was a transitional government put into place that was supposed to lead to civilian leadership instead of military leadership. This was supposed to be Sudan being able to usher in a democratic process after years and years and years of dictatorship and military rule. The problem is that the chairman of that government was Burhan, and Hemeti was his second in command. There were also civilian officers involved in this transitional government, but when Burhan dismantled it, there was really no way to stand up to him effectively. The freedom-loving and democracy-loving United States saw this transpiring, but decided instead to strike up agreements with both Burhan and Hemeti instead of putting them to task for destroying the democratic process that was part of the original agreement. And one of the reasons why the United States took this approach was because of Sudan's normalization agreement with Israel. These normalization agreements are called the Abraham Accords. Both Sudan and the UAE have signed the Abraham Accords, which ultimately benefits the United States and Israel. And these agreements are deals brokered by the ultimate sacrifice: human lives. Human lives in Sudan, human lives in Yemen, human lives in Palestine, human lives everywhere. Paying attention to foreign policy really shows you how interconnected all of our oppression is. So what are some key takeaways from this long video? Number one, gold in the UAE, specifically in Dubai, is a conflict mineral. I alluded to this post by Red Matt on Instagram. Please go follow them, about how to boycott the UAE. And like I said, gold, 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 gold. That's an easy one to just knock off your list. Dates, make sure they're not from the UAE. And then not going to Dubai. That's a really easy, simple one. Not just Dubai, but the UAE in general. This is especially key in light of what I said about how Gulf states are trying to diversify their sources of income. Tourism is a massive, massive cash cow for the UAE. And if we're able to make a dent in it, that makes a difference. Another takeaway, I've been seeing commentary about Saudi cracking down on people who are on Hajj in Mecca wearing the kufiya. And people have been in dismay that Saudi could be doing this when Palestine is under attack by Israel. But Saudi is on the road to normalizing relations with Israel. Saudi is a US ally, and so is Israel. So that is where that is coming from. To liberate Palestine is to liberate Sudan. To liberate Sudan is to liberate Congo. To liberate Congo is to liberate Yemen, and so on and so forth. I hope you learned something from this video and that you go forth and do even more research. Please let me know if you have any other questions. And as always, please keep speaking out about Sudan, about Congo, about Palestine. None of us are free until all of us are free.